11. Corn circles. Arthur looked with distaste at the 2 eggs gazing up at him from the spluttering oil. His head was still reeling from the whiskey he had downed the night before. He had received word as to how much he could expect to be paid for the pub. It was nowhere near enough, considering what he had put into the pub. At the same time, to his frustration, the pub was not a going concern, and he really had little alternative but to sell. He tilted the frying pan to stop the eggs sticking, and then transferred them to the warm plate underneath the grill. A health-conscious person would balk at the sight of the plate. Fried bread, tomatoes, sausages, bacon, mushrooms, baked beans, and now eggs. Arthur picked up a tea towel and wrapped his hand in it so that he could carry the meal out. The rather large gentleman was seated by the fireside when he took the breakfast in. Arthur placed the plate before him. "Ah, thank you. Would you like some tea, sir?" "Do you have coffee?" "Yes, sir." "Black, please, and a morning paper if you have one." "Very good, sir." The gentleman stopped him leaving, resting a hand on his arm. "Tell me, why do you have the fire burning, even when it's summer?" "Gives the place a cheerful atmosphere," Arthur told him morosely. "Ah, yes, that would explain it." The 2 American boys came into the room. They gave Arthur a cheerful greeting and sat down with the large gentleman. That looks good," David said. "We'll have that twice, if that's all right." "Of course, sir." "And coffee." "Tea for me." "Jack, you're turning into an Englishman. Can't drink Diet Pepsi all the time." Arthur stomped out of the room, wondering as he went whether he was quite as suited to the catering trade as he had always thought. Stevens waited until the pub's owner had left, and then leant across the table to speak to Jack and David. "I got in touch with my office first thing this morning. The chap who owned the coach that crashed has just bought another. I was told that he'd bought the first coach to help his brother set up in business, but this can't be the same reason, because his brother died in the accident. Then again, it was Constable Hughes who told me that." David laughed. "Yeah, well, we know how much we can rely on his word, don't we? But there's something I wanted to tell you. I've remembered something that one of my kidnappers said while I was locked up in the cupboard." Stevens paused midway through putting a fork through his bacon. "Oh, yes?" "Yeah, Jack, you know those stones we were looking for?" "Of course I do." "Well, I think we got hold of the wrong end of the stick. I heard him talking about the stones, but he didn't mean just any old stones. He was talking about a stone circle." "What? You mean like Stonehenge?" "Exactly like Stonehenge." "But you said that the centaur had come from between stones," Stevens said. "Hey, I was just saying what I heard. Maybe these centaurs live underground and they have a tunnel that comes up in the middle of a stone circle." "Doesn't sound very likely." "Well, it's a start, isn't it?" "I suppose so." Stevens reached into his pocket. "Here, I've got a map of the area. Stone circles are usually marked." David and Jack moved to the next table and spread the map out on it. Jack spotted the circle first. "Look, there it is. Look, it's in that valley that we couldn't get into. You know, the one with the big gate and the warning signs." "Right. Let me look." Stevens leaned across. "Well, who'd have thought it? That's where I've got to go this morning. Look, this farmhouse is called Dinorban. That's where Emrys Hughes lives." "Emrys Hughes?" "The man who owns the coach. You can come with me, and we'll see what he has to say about all this." "Damn and blast! We could be waiting here all day," Stevens exclaimed, slamming his fist down on the bonnet of his car. After arriving at the gates, they had waited, hopefully, for someone to turn up and let them in. They had been there now for 20 minutes, and Stevens was becoming impatient. "Take it easy," David said. "Why don't we just reverse a few meters and hit the gates at speed? That'll get us through." "Thank you for that oh-so-helpful suggestion, but I am meant to be a police officer." He reached inside his car and pulled open the glove compartment, taking out a portable phone. "Hate the bloody things. Danger to driving, but I suppose they do have their uses. He tapped out a number. Yes, hello, is that Gwydde Police Station? This is Inspector Stevens. I called in yesterday, you remember. Good. Can you find out the phone number of a Mr. Emrys Hughes for me, please? Thanks very much. Bloody nuisance, the whole business. Yes, sorry. He lives in a place called Dinorban, Llanfair Caerog. Quick, Jack. I've got a pen and pad in my car. Jot down this number, will you? He reeled off a telephone number. Thanks very much. Bye. Jack handed the pad over, and Stevens dialed the number. He stood tapping his foot on the ground until the phone was answered. Hello, is that Mr. Emrys Hughes? Oh, it is. Good. I'm Inspector Stevens of Scotland Yard. I'd like a word with you, if that's all right. No, not over the phone. I'm actually waiting at your gate. You'll come and let us in. Too kind, sir, too kind. Stevens threw the phone onto the back seat of his car. About bloody time, too, he swore, staring down the amused look David was giving him. 5 minutes later, a tall figure wearing an undersized Barber jacket and shabby brown trousers ambled up to the gate. You Inspector Stevens? He asked suspiciously. That's right. Stevens showed his identity card to the man. Well, you'd better come up to the house then. He dug in his pockets for a bunch of keys and then reached through the gate to unfasten the chain and padlock. He swung open the metal gates and let Stevens drive through, then closed and locked the gates behind the car. He wandered over to the driver's window and leaned against the side of the car. You follow the gravel road up and round, see, and I'll meet you up at the house. You wouldn't like to hop in the back, would you? Stevens offered. Emrys laughed harshly. No, I'll meet you up there. He pushed himself off the car and walked slowly round in front of it. I'll be waiting. He must have run, David said, looking at the man standing calmly outside the front door of the house. He doesn't look out of breath, Jack commented. Yeah, but he must have run, David protested. There's no other way he could have got here ahead of us. Stop trying to work out how he got here. Let's just talk to him, Stevens suggested, getting out of the car. Mr. Hughes, thank you for seeing me. Well, you're police, isn't it? Who are these two? Mr. Gibson and Mr. Pilgrim, Stevens replied, in an attempt to give some sense of official involvement. Well, you'd better come inside. I'll brew up some tea. He took them inside and sat them down at a flimsy kitchen table that swayed ominously when Jack rested his elbows on it. The kitchen was untidy, with no sign of order in the way it was arranged. So, what can I do for you? Emrys asked. I would have come to see you sooner, but I was told you were away. It's about the coach accident a few days ago. Oh, yes. Well, the coach is registered as belonging to you. Hughes acknowledged this with a nod. So, do you know anything about what it was being used for on that night? No. Should I? I had hoped so, Stevens admitted. We need to clear some details up. Well, Selwyn would know, but obviously he's in no fit state to tell. He didn't seem particularly upset at his brother's death, but these things affected different people in different ways. So you wouldn't know anything about the large amount of money that was found in it? Stevens pressed him. No. And you wouldn't be able to identify any of the passengers? I very much doubt it. You sure? Sure. Is that all? Stevens considered this, but thought of something else. So why have you bought a new coach? Got to keep my brother's business going, haven't I? There's his family to think of. I didn't know he had a family. No. Is that all? Well, there's also the matter of a stone circle on your land. Would you mind if we took a look at it? Yes, Emrys answered bluntly. Jack leapt up. What do you know about centaurs? Where are you hiding them? I don't know what you're talking about. And I don't think you're a police officer. I think I should ask you to leave. Why won't you let us see the circle? David asked. It's private property, isn't it? Why should I? This is where he came from, isn't it? Jack shouted. This is where the centaur came from. Centaurs? Hughes sneered. They don't exist, boy. A legend. I think we might as well leave, lads, Stevens told them. I don't think Mr. Hughes has any reason for letting us see his circle. If you'd come down and let us out of the gates, Mr. Hughes. Aye, sorry you had a wasted visit. I think your American friends would do better to look in Greece for centaurs. Back in the car, Jack said to Stevens, He's laughing at us. He knows all about it. There's nothing we can do at the moment. He has every right not to let us wander round his land. Maybe if we came back some other time, when he's not around. I'm beginning to think we may as well leave Llanfaircairn and get back home, Jack said. You could be right, David agreed. We're getting nothing done here. Even Stevens was prepared to admit defeat. Can't hang around much longer either. I've got to get back to my office. And besides, my colleagues are using the coach accident to account for some missing persons. It tidies up some cases for them. He drew the car to a halt by the gates. This time, they arrived some minutes ahead of Hughes, as if he was deliberately delaying them. Stevens looked at him sourly, hoping for a parting shot. You know those signs on your gate are illegal. You can't shoot people, and I hope you have a license for that shotgun. Jack cocked his head to one side. He whispered to David, Do you hear that? Don't you worry about me, Emrys assured Stevens. I'll only shoot centaurs with it. David's eyes widened. It's hoofbeats, and lots of them. Jack pushed open his car door at the same time as Emrys pulled up his shotgun and loosed off both barrels into the trees. And then, between the trees, a girl on a horse appeared. Yee-haw! She shouted, and a herd of horses exploded from the woods in a flurry of legs, streaming manes and swirling tails. Every one of them was a magnificent animal, powerful and obviously bursting with vitality. Stevens pushed himself slowly out of the car, his eyes growing wide as the horses drew closer. A smile crossed his face as he reached out a hand to pull Emrys's gun away from him. What was that you said about centaurs? He grinned triumphantly at the look on Emrys's face. I don't think you mentioned unicorns.